Hey, welcome in everybody to Live Weather Impact. I'm Chief Meteorologist Brad Panovich here on this gorgeous Wednesday evening. Boy, what a day. It was unbelievable out there. Chamber of Commerce Day for sure. Temperatures were in the low to mid 70s. It was beautifully sunny, but it was a cold start this morning. We started in the upper 30s to low 40s. In fact, we jumped about 35 degrees in some areas from the morning low to the afternoon high. So it was a pretty dramatic change. We'll take a view out there right now. As you know, and I don't have to tell you, it's dark already. That early sunset still kind of hard to get used to because it's happening during our 5 o'clock newscast now. 5:25 today was the sunset. So it's happening quick, which means by 6 the temperature's fallen already. That's the other thing. This time of year when the sun goes down, that temperature falls quickly. We had like a 10 to 15 degree drop between 5 and 6 o'clock because the sun was going down pretty much at the bottom of the hour. Let me show you the high temperature and low temperature today. There you go, 42, exactly where you're supposed to be in the morning, but 73 this afternoon. That's way up there. I mean, you're 7 degrees above average, when you're only, 8 degrees from the record. So it's a pretty warm day. And by the way, the record only being 81 tells you that we're in that time of year. When records are 81, it's starting to get cool out there. The average high 66 and 42, which is going to continue to trend down, by the way, as we go through the next couple of months here until we get to the first day of winter coming up. It's about a month and a half from now as we get towards the 22nd of December. Some high clouds. We had a dry front today. So if you wondered where the wind came from, that dry cold front, which means it doesn't have any rain with it. It just kicked up the winds, and we will see a pretty dramatic wind shift tonight from the southwest eventually to the north. Low temperatures this morning. This is what I'm talking about. Look how cold it was. If you're in Lincoln, it's 34 this morning. It was 42 in Charlotte, 37 Rock Hill, 37 Concord, 35 Albemarle. But then this afternoon, we're in the mid 70s. So it's pretty dramatic turnaround. Now, we had the fire danger today. We'll likely see this tomorrow, probably not to the extreme that we had today because the winds won't be quite as gusty. But two things don't change tomorrow. The dry fuels, which are the brush and leaves, the dormant vegetation, that's not going anywhere. The dry air, that's not going anywhere. The only thing we get tomorrow is maybe cut about 5 to 10 miles per hour, I should say, off of those wind speeds. And just to give you a heads up, that could be a problem. So tonight, not as cold, up mid to upper 40s. I think it'll be one of those nights we might barely drop below 50. So very comfortable weather out there tonight. And then tomorrow, I'll call it not as warm because it's still above average. Remember, the average high is 66, so 69 puts you at 3 degrees above. But notice the wind direction northeast tomorrow, not southwest like we had today. So a lot to talk about over the next 4 days without a lot of weather. And what I mean by that is we've got a series of dry cold fronts. One there, another one, it's not as dry, but it's pretty dry as it approaches us Saturday morning. Could bring us a few showers, and a third front on Sunday. Let's break this down further because the front today, obviously no issues into tomorrow. The front, though, for Friday night, Saturday, will probably produce some pretty strong storms to our west, but they will weaken dramatically as they head in our direction. But we're still likely going to see some rain, but this is the perfect kind of rain. This is 2 o'clock in the morning. Saturday morning. So it's raining in the mountains and foothills. By 3-4, it's moving across the Piedmont. So you're getting rain, but it's falling while we're sleeping, and it's the overnight rain. And then by the time you wake up, 9 a.m., it's sunny, it's dry, it's a beautiful Saturday. A lot of stuff going on this weekend. Friday night, obviously, Charlotte FC, home match, winner take all against New York City. That's going to be a huge game. Should be no weather issues there. Sunday, Panthers at home, no issue there. So that's why the timing of all this is pretty ideal. But this will be the headlines. We've got a big cool down for Monday into Tuesday. We're talking high temperatures probably in the 40s, low temperatures upper 20s. So this will be like a taste of January weather here in November. By the way, the coldest our average high gets in January is 51. So anytime we're seeing highs around 47, 48, 49, that's kind of typical of January. And I'm holding out. Jeb, I don't know about you. Have you turned your heat on yet?
No, I never turn the heat on.
No.
Nope. Bundle up.
Yes. I'm the same way, just because it's cold in the morning, but the afternoons are so nice. So
it was 73 today.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but next week might change your mind. And it's not because of the mornings. I can get through the cold mornings. Like you said, if it's 73 or 68 even, it's fine. When we only get to 47, when it doesn't warm up during the afternoon, that's kind of the key for me. I'm probably going to have to turn the heat on next week. So I try to make it to Thanksgiving. That's always my goal. But I don't think this year I'm going to make it. So let's talk about that cold snap. Here comes the front. Friday night, Saturday morning, that moves through. Again, the next front here is Saturday night, Sunday. We don't really feel it, though, till Sunday night, Monday. And there's the northwest flow. So a lot of social media buzz, people posting long-range model guidance of snow. Hey, this is not going to snow outside of the mountains. This is going to be northwest flow, typical cold front winter setup. The lakes are wide open, so some cold air spilling over the warm waters of the Great Lakes does produce long-range lake effect. We call it northwest flow. So, yeah, those typical spots, Beach, Sugar, Howard's Knob, Roan Mountain, Mount Mitchell, Grayson Highlands up there, Mount Rogers. So those typical spots that get northwest flow could see the first measurable snow of the season. And if you think it's early, it's not. It's actually right on schedule. The first average measurable snow in the mountains for areas like Banner Elk typically right around Veterans Day, which is Tuesday. That's November 11th. So kind of makes sense that we would see some of the first snow. But I think this is the bigger story for all of us. So if you have the vegetable garden, the summer garden going, this might be it next week. 27, that's not a little frost. That's not a light freeze. That's a moderate to borderline hard freeze, because that means you're going to spend probably 6-7 hours below freezing. That's going to kill everything that's tender. So your summer plants, your vegetables, it won't make the grass go dormant. That's more of a soil temperature thing, so you got to get the soil temperature. But this also will knock the bugs down, especially the mosquitoes, fleas, and ticks. They never go away, by the way. They don't kill them completely. It just knocks them down. And then we see temperatures, again, on Wednesday near freezing. So 2 nights of that, I would suspect we're probably going to see an end to the growing season coming up early next week. So if you got the garden going, just heads up, it might be time to give it a rest. And, hey, you made it to the second week of November. That's pretty good for the growing season. Here's a look at that cold air. That's Sunday, 70s for Panthers. Then look at this. We cooled down into the 18 in Boone. That is going to be chilly with some snow up there. I bet the ski resorts will try to make snow and maybe get a slope or two open just to say they're open before Thanksgiving. But we'll see. I don't think they'll last long because we're going to warm back up next week. So the weekend forecast, mid-70s. Quick look at your Jerry Hunt Supercenter 7-day forecast. Look at that dramatic cool down. Big impact with that change on Monday. I'm going to go 10 days out just to show you, yeah, it's cold, but it's a 2-day cold snap. We're back in the upper 60s by Wednesday and the end of next week. So, yeah, it's a cold snap, but it's not prolonged. Just prepare yourself now. That will be a dramatic change coming up early next week. So stick around. Coming up after the break, we're going to talk with Tim. We're going to talk about the weather we didn't get to talk about yesterday. We'll talk about this full moon, why it has a weird name. I think it's fascinating. We'll talk about the fire danger and this cold snap that's all heading our way coming up after the break. So stick and stay. Welcome back. Tim Buckley joins me as always from WFMY. I think we could actually talk about weather today, Tim. You were running around like crazy today.
Yeah.
Tell everybody where you were for your early shows. You were live somewhere, right?
Yeah, we had a nice thing here actually, Brad. With everything going on in the news and all that stuff, we had decided last week it would be a good idea to have one of those emergency food drives. So, had one of those, partnered up with the Second Harvest Food Bank up here. They do a lot of good work in Northwest North Carolina, so getting food to people that need it. But they're telling us that they're really low on it right now, and with all the need that's still growing, right, with the shutdown and the SNAP benefits going on. They need more. So we kind of put this together pretty quickly, but got a ton of food. They filled up a truck over there, got about $100,000 of donations as well. So just really good stuff from the community. And what was really the highlight for me is we had the Greensboro Gargoyle mascot was there and helped me do the weather a little bit. So for those that don't know, that's our new hockey team that plays in the Coliseum. They're the minor league team for the Canes, and pretty excited about it. They're home all the way through the weekend, I guess. So you can check that out if you'd like to.
Bill? Gargoyle, is that what you said?
Gargoyles, yes. Greensboro
I got to see this mascot. That's
okay,
cool.
I'm gonna pull them up.
All right,
It might
Tim,
take
let's
me a
talk a
second,
little bit
but we'll
about
get 'em.
what we were going to talk about yesterday. And it already happened today, but we had this high fire danger today, which was kind of what we expect. I think it's interesting this time of year. We're strictly in the fall fire season right now. And it's always interesting because this time of year, I think people think, okay, it rained last week. We should be good for fire danger. But the problem is this time of year is when the leaves fall and the vegetation goes dormant. When it does rain, that water isn't stored in the plants like it normally is in the summer. So if we get a couple dry days or it gets really windy or we get really low humidity, those fuels, we call them, dry out really quick, Tim. And just like a wood pile, if it got wet, you couldn't burn it immediately. But if it sat out in the sun for a day or two, it's now good again. Mm-hmm. That's kind of what happened today. We had this really windy, dry pattern, and now we're going to have to watch this, I think, through the rest of the season. And we have the drought, too, by the way. We're still in the drought. We'll see what it comes out on Thursday. But this fire season is pretty normal when we get these windy, dry days like this.
Yeah, exactly right. So everything that Brad's saying is right there. And I think something that we'll want to watch tomorrow, and we should have this for you tomorrow, is what's the update on the drought? Because every Thursday we get a new map. There should be some update. When we talked about it last week, we had just come off of the good rain. And we were maybe anticipating a little bit more of an update than what we ended up getting. But that rain only went through last Tuesday, so it wasn't really a full report per se. So some of this week's drought monitor should have a little bit of what fell last week, early in the week. However, it hasn't rained since then. And so probably we're getting to the point where things are drying out again. And like Brad was saying, the fire danger, when you have these low humidity days, you have the breezy days, that's just going to be a fact. And really, with all these, we're kind of in a pattern right now where we have a different cold front coming up about every 2 days. All of these weather changes, all of these transitions, they have pressure changes, and pressure change makes wind. And so we're going to have a lot of windy days and low humidity days. So I would expect that we're going to see that continue with more fire danger over the next couple of weeks probably, and really probably through much of the wintertime.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what the drought monitor looks like. I'm glad you showed that because that was Tuesday to Tuesday, but it came out on Thursday. This week we'll have whatever fell Tuesday, Wednesday, which wasn't a lot, by the way. We'll see how much of a recovery we had. I would just like to see some of the moderate severe drought go down a little bit, and I certainly think that would help the situation. But I just want people to know that just because we get rain one week, it can dry out pretty quickly this time of year because the vegetation's dormant. And if you're like me, my yard and my neighborhood's yard, there's leaves everywhere, Tim. And those leaves, when they dry out, that is like the perfect starter for a fire. So it just feels like we've got more of those fuels this time of year. So when it does dry out, even with the ground being wet, you can get a fire to start pretty quickly.
And really, I think, if you look ahead to next week, and I know we'll get into this more in a little bit, everybody probably talking about the cold, rightly so, and the temperatures, but you're also going to see really gusty winds. So coming up on Monday, I mean, I could easily see people gusting 30, 40 miles per hour around here, way higher than that in the mountains, of course. So there will be a high wind component to that also. And even when it's cold outside, you can have fire danger. Right? Colder air doesn't hold as much water, and so it really is going to be bone dry. And we're probably not going to get liquid out of it, whereas the mountains, they might get some frozen liquid.
Yeah, and as we know, when it gets cold, people tend to use more fires to keep themselves warm, so that creates a whole different kind of fire danger, if you will, when you get to these cold snaps. So let's talk about the full moon, which was technically full this morning, but you can see it again tonight. Tim, I was utterly fascinated by this little tidbit, and you probably have seen some conflicting stuff online. Brittany and I were actually digging into this today. We were really fascinated. So this month's full moon typically is called the beaver moon, which for whatever reason people love talking about the beaver moon. It's just, I think it's more that people love it. But the reason it normally is called the beaver moon, just to peel back why, it's an old saying, because usually in mid to late November the beavers start building their den for the winter and the ponds start to freeze over. Well, this year was kind of weird. The harvest moon happened. Now, I feel like I need a flow chart for this. So I'll break it down for you. So let me just get this all straight. So going back to September, if the full moon of September falls before September 8th, it's called the corn moon, because that's when the corn harvest happens. And growing up in the Midwest, I can tell you late August, early September, that checks out. But if it doesn't, it's called the harvest moon, because that full moon is closest to the autumnal equinox, which happens around the 22nd of September. Well, this year, it happened early in September, so it was called the corn moon. Now, let's go ahead to October. Now, in October, if the moon falls before October 8th, it's called the harvest moon, because that makes it the one closest to the equinox. Okay, so you follow me so far. If not, October is called the hunter's moon. Now, in November, if the full moon falls before November 7th and we've just had the harvest moon, it's called the hunter's moon and not the beaver moon. So it's kind of complicated. I don't know how often that happens, that we have these full moons so early in all 3 months that kind of makes the change. But what we found interesting, the first place I saw this is on Earth's Guide. Full credit to them. They do a great job. They do astronomy and astronomical stuff. They were pointing this out. In Time and Date, another great site, they originally had called it the beaver moon, but today we noticed they changed their website, Tim. They said, we talked to the folks at Earth Sky, and we now realize after digging research that, yes, this should be the hunter's moon or the beaver moon. So they made it kind of interesting that they actually changed their website today to reflect that this could be called the hunter's moon. Regardless of what you call it, it's a full moon, it's a super moon, which is the closest, but it's a unique super moon, right, Tim? It's the closest one of the entire year.
Yeah, so we talk about this when we talk about supermoon. We talk about perigee and apogee. In this case, it would be the perigee, or closer to us, and you're able to get a nice little bit of an extra big view. And really, this is something that you may not notice unless it's pointed out to you, like we're doing right now, explaining that it looks a little bit bigger than usual. But my advice always is if you're aware of this, and if you're watching the show, you tend to probably be aware of these things. It's always better to look at the moon when it's rising. Or you could see it when it's setting as well, but we tend to pay more attention when it's rising. But the reason is that when any object is really low on the horizon, it has to pass through more of the Earth's atmosphere, and that might sound a little strange, but when you're looking straight up, you're only looking at a small chunk of the atmosphere. When you're looking along a curved surface, we're actually looking at a bigger slice of the atmosphere, and so that light that comes at us from the moon, which is reflected sunlight, it's coming and passing through more air, and so it's having more chance to kind of get filtered out, and it can acquire cool colors. It can also appear a little bit bigger than it actually is. If you watch the sun sunset at the beach, you see the same thing. Sometimes the sun can morph a little bit and look a little squished or something, and it can also have a really beautiful color that you don't see when it's higher in the sky. So it's always a good idea to look at the moon when it's lowest on the horizon. So go ahead, you can kind of Google moonrise. Moonrise is a thing just like sunrise is. The only difference is it varies by about an hour and change per day compared to the sunrise. So take the best pictures when you're going to see it lower on the horizon. And really, it's always nice to see those shots right there above the tree line, I think, is when it looks the prettiest. Or if you have a really skilled photographer looking along a cityscape, if you're way far away from the Charlotte skyline, you can get cool angles of it between the buildings or something. I love to see those cool views. That's almost always right there at moonrise, which today was at about 5:30.
And the other cool thing about looking at it near the horizon, Tim, as you mentioned, you get that moon illusion, right, where it looks larger than it actually is because you're relating it to objects in the foreground. So I always think that's cool. It makes it look even bigger than it actually is. And the good news is you get to see it all night tonight. Now, technically, it was full this morning at 8:19 a.m., but it was already below the horizon by then. So your best chance to see it full was last night. And if you didn't get it last night, you get to see it again tonight. And it's up until, 8:14 in the morning tomorrow. So you got all night to watch it again. I love when we get 2 nights of seeing basically the full moon. So get out there, check it out. King tides, by the way, for folks watching on the coast, we're seeing really high astronomical high tides. Because this one is so much closer, we're likely going to have some coastal flooding. I haven't checked down at Charleston, Tim. I don't know if you have, but I wonder if they had some tidal flooding this morning or this evening because of these astronomical high tides, which coincide with the full moon cycle.
That's always something we have to check nowadays, especially in Charleston, like you said. And even on the Carolina coastline, you can have some issues. But it looks like they have some special weather statements down that way, at least in the Wilmington area. Minor coastal flooding. There you go. So possible from now through the next couple of days. So that's something they're going to be watching all the way through Friday morning during high tide cycle, is that minor flooding problem. And in Wilmington, just like Charleston, that can happen right there on the urban area, right there along the Riverwalk, things like that. The locals know the spots to avoid, but if you're down there on a trip, you might not. So Wilmington, I can tell you, the street to avoid is called Water Street. That's why it's called Water Street.
Yeah, we all know why it got that name, because there's usually water on it. All right, Tim, so we got to talk about next week. We've actually been talking about for a while. I know you have as well locally, this big change, big cold snap. I think a lot of people get caught up in the guidance, long-range look at snow. Let's be honest, the snow doesn't look like it's going to be that big of a deal. It's kind of your typical northwest flow snow, but kind of the first measurable snow of the season for the mountains, which is, by the way, I looked at climatology for Banner Elk. The average first measurable snow, November 11th. So it's like right on schedule, right? Basically for that. But I think the bigger story for all of us, even outside of the mountains, is going to be the cold. This is legit like a taste of January type cold for us. And this could be the first widespread killing freeze of the season. And I think a bigger thing, I joked with Jeb, we haven't turned our heat on, Tim. I don't know if you turned your heat on yet. But when you don't see the high temperature get out of the 40s, that's usually a sign I'm probably going to have to turn my heat on. I can handle the cool nights, but these cold mornings and afternoons combined are really going to cool my house down.
Well, I think it's a good idea to, like you said, for folks that have held out so far. Kudos, by the way. That's good. But you also probably should test it. Make sure it's doing well. Make sure it's going to be in good shape going into next week, because it's going to be cold out there. Temperatures are probably going to be in the upper 20s to low 30s in the mornings, and the afternoon temperatures are going to be tough too in the 40s. But with that wind, I think the wind chill is going to be really nasty throughout the course of the day, right? So that's going to be something to really keep an eye on. With how breezy it's going to be Monday afternoon, it's just going to be nasty cold. It's not going to be fun to be outside. And like you said, the mountains will get some snow out of this. I think anybody who's convinced anywhere else could is probably in for a disappointment. But the mountains will get some snow, I would bet, going into Monday.
Yeah, I think the models will always throw you that little I'm going to have post-frontal snow in the Piedmont. We know from meteorologically, northwest flow, there's going to be downsloping. That usually dries everything out east of the mountains. But because the lakes are wide open, Tim, and they're so warm, there's probably going to be a pretty good moisture fetch that comes down to the mountains, especially West Virginia, I think, because of the trajectory. But I'm thinking areas like Beech Mountain, Sugar Mountain, Mount Roan, Roan Mountain, I should say, Mount Rogers up in Grayson Highlands. Those areas definitely are the ones that kind of stick up into the perpendicular flow. So if you're really desperate to see snow, Newfound Gap, we all know that area right on the border. Those are going to kind of be the areas, I think, if you want to go see snow, that's probably where you're going to have to go Monday morning, which right now looks to be the best.
And it's a good point you make that I think even locals might not realize, but a lot of the moisture for this does come from the Great Lakes, and that's kind of how is that possible? But if you go upstream, and when we say upstream in weather, it means where's the wind coming from. You can trace this back to Lake Michigan. You can trace it back to even Lake Superior in some cases. So there you go. It's no coincidence that the lakes are filled in and color-coded right there with that snow. And like Brad was saying, when they're open, that means no ice on them. There's a lot more moisture transport that happens with that cold air above the lakes, and that's exactly what's going to be happening. So they'll get some good lake effect snow up there, but that does bring our moisture for the North Carolina mountains. But at the same time, when that air goes down on our side of the mountains, think about it. You go from 5,000-6,000 feet down to 1,000 feet, you're drying it out. And that's why we don't tend to get it on a moisture pattern like this.
It's always interesting because even in the mountains, I've been up there for a Northwest Flow event. You're in like Blowing Rock. There might be some flurries. It's sunny out, and then you go over to like Beach or Banner Elk, and it's just snowing like crazy. So even in the mountains, depending on which side of the mountain you're on, it can be dramatically different in the kind of snow you see. Now, we know the cold is coming, Tim, but the other good news, I think, for folks who aren't ready for it, it doesn't look like it lasts very long. I mean, it looks like by the end of the week, we could be back above average with some upper 60s, which I say above average by November standards. So it's not like a super long cold snap, but I think it's more the fact that we're going to go from possibly for us down here in Charlotte, I don't know what you're forecasting Sunday, but mid-70s on Sunday afternoon with possibly upper 40s for Monday. I think it's the change that will really catch people off guard.
It's a big impact. It's a big change. I mean, I think we're going probably from around 70 on Sunday afternoon down to the upper 20s on Tuesday morning. So that's a big shift, but we're kind of branding it as 2 days of winter. So you'll have 2 days of winter. Carolina winter anyway, 40s for highs, that's Carolina winter for us. And then you'll go right back to it. You go right back to average by Wednesday. So if you don't like the ice, you don't like the snow, you don't like the cold, hunker down for 2 days and you can go back outside on Wednesday. Somebody that does like the ice, though, here you go. I've found him. This is the Gargoyle. His name is Doyle. Doyle the Gargoyle. They had a contest to name him, and well, there you go. He's a fine guy, and you can see him at the Greensboro Coliseum anytime you'd like. Good stuff.
All right, that's cool. I was expecting something different. That is actually a pretty cool mascot. I love the fangs. It's like somewhat scary, Tim, but also not scary enough for kids to be afraid of it. So I think it's like the perfect blend right there. Go check out the Gargoyle. Doyle the Gargoyle. I love it. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow right back here. We'll talk more about the cold snap, and obviously we'll have the drought monitor coming up tomorrow.